Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Pierkowski. I am the Assistant Director of Online Teaching for SUNY Online, and I'm here to talk to you today about a project that I and others have been working on for past 3 or 4 months or so. And it is all about using the OSCQR rubric to ensure regular substantive interaction in online courses. And I have a few presenters with me today. First, I'd like to introduce just the work group. I don't need to read out all the names to you, as you can see them on the screen, but everyone here on this slide has contributed to changing our rubric, updating our OSCQR rubric to make sure that it covers regular and substantive interaction in its content for reviewing online courses. So we're going to dig more deeply into that in a few seconds. Today, our panel consists of myself, Tonka, Jeff, and Elena. And each of us will be presenting a little piece of it. I encourage your questions and comments, both in chat, and feel free to activate your microphone. That's fine too. We'd be happy to talk to you about this. Regular and substantive interaction is going to be an ongoing topic for us as we move forward, and as I move through this presentation, I'm sure you'll see why. Just to make sure everyone understands what the OSCQR rubric, for anyone who doesn't know, is a rubric for helping campuses, departments, and individual faculty examine their online courses and making sure that they meet certain standards of quality. The OSCQR rubric is really all about continuous improvement, and I could go on. We have many presentations about OSCQR itself, but I'm going to assume that a short explanation will suffice for most. And if not, you'll see a few web addresses where you can seek more information on the OSCQR rubric. But the OSCQR rubric is more or less the SUNY created rubric for online course quality. So what is new to our conversation is this concept of regular and substantive interaction. So what we will call from this point forward RSI. RSI is essentially a mandate from accrediting bodies that online courses have a certain amount and a certain style of interaction between the instructor and the students. So as you can see on the slide, some defining qualities of RSI are that interaction be initiated by the instructor, that it be scheduled and predictable, and that those interactions be academic in nature. So what we're looking at here, some of it can be deduced by course design. We can look at the design of a course and determine if things are being initiated by the instructor, scheduled and predictable. And then some of these interactions happen while the course is being delivered. The OSCQR rubric really only concerns itself with course design. So I just want to make sure that we understand that moving forward, because these are the OSCQR rubric is comprised of standards that we use to look at a course without students in it. So an empty course. That is how OSCQR is implemented. So when we look at how RSI has been infused into the OSCQR rubric, we really want to understand the context that it is designed for course review and for course design, not necessarily course delivery. But here is what RSI is in terms of how it should manifest in an online course. So this regular and substantive interaction needs to meet these 4 conditions, as well as this 5th. It can be direct instruction. Again, that would we can look at elements of course design that support direct instruction, but we would more or less want to see the interaction between students to determine whether that's actually present or not. Assessment and feedback. Does the learner get direct feedback from the instructor about their learning? Information about the course content is certainly visible in looking at the course design. And then discussion forums, which again ensure interaction between students, but we also want to see, if we are looking at a course through an RSI lens, we want to see interaction with the instructor as well. The instructor being the one initiating the discussion and then perhaps involved in it or involved directly in the assessment or evaluation of the learner's performance in the discussion forums. And and then we get somewhat vague other instructional methods approved by the institution's accreditor. I've had opportunity in 2 different meetings with Middle States representatives, our accrediting body, to try to put a real point on some instructional devices that would ensure RSI. And I have not yet gotten anything in particular that that is underneath that heading of other instructional methods. So we're awaiting quite impatiently, I'd say, some more definition about those other instructional methods. And so in this panel presentation, I invite if those of you who have information to share and talk about any of these concepts, please feel free to jump in. So Empire State created this wonderful graphic that is very helpful in understanding what RSI is. RSI wants to ensure that our online courses are not correspondence courses. So here we see a graphic that's that shows sort of the spectrum from a correspondence course to what is defined as a distance education course. And so you'll see this graphic later on in the presentation and throughout our resources. We've used this quite extensively, as you'll soon see. One thing about RSI, don't want to give the impression that it's only because an accrediting body says that we need to pay attention to it. We consider RSI very consistent with our best practices that we have been condoning for a very long time. So essentially what we want is we want the learner to feel a certain attentiveness on the part of the instructor. And we want, an online course to be as intimate and as we want the learner as close to the instructor as possible in an online setting. So what we have here is correspondence course on the left, distance education course on the right, and sort of the gray in between. And not to scare anybody, because that's not our intention here. But what we do want to understand, again, as accrediting bodies have, sort of dictated to us, according to Section 102, an institution is not eligible to participate in Title IV programs if 50% or more of its students are enrolled in correspondence courses. Okay, so Middle States is getting, I think, is trying to be more definitive in what it considers a correspondence course as opposed to an online education course, or a distance education course, I should say. So what is a distance education course? These are all quoted. And so one in which instruction is delivered by one or more types of technology, et cetera, et cetera. And these technologies support regular and substantive interaction between students and the instructor. So they're very sort of explicit about that need for RSI between students and instructors. And that interaction needs to be both predictable and scheduled. So that's what they define as substantive. Okay, predictable and scheduled. And the instructor will promptly and proactively engage in that substantive interaction with the students. So with the OSCQR rubric, what we want to do is we want to try to use OSCQR as a checklist, not only for online course quality, but for regular and substantive interaction. So again, what our work group has been working toward is making sure that OSCQR as a resource for course review covers these bases as well. And we'll show you some examples of that in a second. So before I get to our workbook charge and work group charge, I'd like to just stop here and ask if there are any questions from the group. No questions? At least I'm not hearing them. Okay. Okay, if there are no questions, I can't see the chat from where I am, but I'm going to ask Jeff Dugan to step up and talk a little bit about, how the work group worked.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for that overview. When I came into the work group really quickly, I needed a refresher on what RSI really meant, and it was helpful to have the whole group and Rob and kind of be able to summarize it. And I hope did just something similar as he did for you today. So very helpful. So our charge as a group, as you can see here, we went through the OSCQR rubric and looked through the standards and try to find things that related to RSI. RSI is a practice that, as we even look at SLN and the type of online learning, distance learning that they promoted really meshed well together. And OSCQR at its fundamental base, if you look at kind of the underpinnings of what are some of the standards hold up as good practices and look for, RSI was already in place. So we wanted to take a fresh look at OSCQR, update the materials so that it identified those RSI elements that already existed and emphasize them. So that was kind of our charge. And what we did is we went through all 50 and found those. So we found a couple. Like I said, it was already in place. It was already interwoven in OSCQR, these kind of RSI elements. And we wanted to, again, clearly call it out. So we're going to go into very specific standards, but you can see in OSCQR 4.0, I guess, is what this would be, is version 4 of OSCQR. These standards have been updated or have been kind of, there are specific ones that specifically address RSI, and there are ones that are related that have been emphasized, the elements inside of them to support RSI. So I think we'll go into a couple of specific examples now. Right, there we go. So I'm going to start with one that I helped craft with the team, and one that I found meaningful. That was 39. So expectations for interaction are clearly stated. Talking about netiquette, grade weighting, models, examples, and so on. And we wanted to just work on that a little bit. I don't know what about the word netiquette stuck, but I pushed for, in OSCQR 4.0, you won't see the word netiquette. But more specifically, where this actually comes into RSI is we're talking about all course interactions. Now, RSI, as Rob well put, is very much instructor focused, instructor led. But we all know that instructor led communication is not the only communication that happens in a course. It is, part of it is like 1/3 of the communication that happens in a course. But if a course, a distance learning course, is working well, there are at least 3 types of communication that happen. But again, if it's not modeled well by the instructor, as you can see that we changed it to, then they don't, all 3 don't thrive. So the 3 that we now state very clearly are instructor to student, student to student, and student to instructor. Having those 3 kind of very well, those different types of communication well spelled out. Again, for looking at the instructor not only as the leader of those conversations, the leader of the learning experience, but really the model. So that when you are setting up your course, this looks far more like, I'm going to talk to you the way I want you to talk to everybody else, the way I want you to talk to me, modeling that good community behavior and community leading. So I was really excited about that one. But I believe I'm going to pass this on now to Elena from Empire, which is very well represented here. And I'll let her talk about some of the standards she thought were very important.
Thank you, Jeff. So I picked a couple more standards, and why we decided to pick a few just to explain our thought process and discussions as a group, and then why we revised them, and then provide a few examples how we're thinking about applying them when we review the courses. So I picked standard 3. It's, you can read this pretty much about importance of having course syllabus in the course, and where it's easy to find and navigate, and it's deconstructed. That language has been changed to address a few things. First of all, SUNY Online courses and template doesn't include deconstructed syllabus. We've done some usability testing and known that students now use mobile devices more often. Having students just make one click to be able to access that document, download it, view it, made more sense. And then we made it concentrate more on the expectations. That's where the RSI fits really nicely. Some of the examples I can give what we're doing at SUNY Empire to address this. In a nursing program where the courses are quite structured, they're templated, our lead instructional designer worked with the curriculum committee to devise a language to include in all the nursing syllabi. And we changed, we're not using the federal language. It's named Instructor Communication Plan. And all it says that I, as an instructor, will be communicating with you in such a manner. I will be providing feedback through participating in the discussions, providing feedback, etc. I'm not going to read, it's 2 paragraphs. Then it goes into how students going to be evaluated at a high level. And then also, and it was decided by the faculty on response time. So if students send an email or the questions in some other fashion. The instructor is saying they will respond within 2 business days, and any feedback and grades on the assignments would be provided, generally speaking, within 7 to 10 business days. So it's one approach how to make it visible and predictable, that interaction in the course. Put it in the main course document, the syllabus. In undergrad program, we took another approach because it's a variety of programs, it's different pedagogical approaches, different course templates. Instead of coming up with one language that would work for everyone, we developed a placeholder that instructs or suggests faculty and course developers, which is usually one and the same, on what to address there, which is just please include a statement on how the interaction will take place in this course. And we also include the link to the resource page we developed on our website to provide more guidelines. And of course, they can work with instructional designers to incorporate it and to embed it. And another important element related to the syllabus is an example, if instructor is planning to run optional office hours, virtual office hours, it needs to go into course syllabus. Students need to know about the times and how they're going to be conducted ahead of time. And things change. It can be just another message in the syllabus saying, please note, if there are any changes to the schedule, they will be posted in the course announcement. So just to end this standard, I'm just going to say that most of the courses already include a lot of RSI. And what we end up doing when we work with faculty members is just to take a look at the course and help them bring that information up front to meet that predictable part. And so students know how they're going to get that feedback, how the interaction is going to happen in the course. And we can then move to another example that I picked is 38. It used to be all about the expectations for feedback from instructor, which now is addressed pretty much by the previous standard. That should be in the syllabus and those expectations. Oh, excuse me. So we completely made it all about RSI. You can read this, but why I like this standard, it makes you look at your course holistically. Take a look at it and see what can you do to make it better to address these things, interactions, making them predictable, making them substantive. And I'm just going to jump into a few examples. You can think about it with that scale, how to use it. But one way we've been applying this is looking at the course. It's already a good course. It pretty much meets all the criteria, but then in some of our courses, the modules are multi-week modules. So let's say it's 3 weeks or 4 weeks, which makes sense. Some topics are quite extensive. They need more time. But then instead of having that assignment, having one big assignment to be submitted at the end of week 3 or 4, whatever it is, and discussion running for 3 weeks, we'll work with the faculty member to break it up into smaller chunks in 2 weeks, which is another best practice, of course. And that would allow for more frequent feedback for students. It creates more scaffolding, more support for students. Another example, I'm thinking about my course that I teach. It's an undergrad full online course. So after doing all this research and working on this group with RSI committee, now I'm thinking, what am I going to do next time I'm going to run the course? And a few things that I've identified in my course, since 15 weeks, 15 modules, variety of assignments, reflections, some auto-graded quizzes, announcements, variety of ways to communicate. But some areas I found that I can improve is number one, again, make all that interaction visible in my course, get in course syllabus. Make that statement, students know how to find feedback. And why it's important, because even though I use rubrics in the course quite often, quite a lot, if it's not A, students immediately send me an email and asking why. And I have to respond and say it's in the rubric with the feedback. All it takes is another click. And now I realize I need to spell it out. I need to explain it in the syllabus, put it up front. Another example is the course includes various form instructions, some text in a form of text and some video instructions. And while I have Q&A discussion forum and for students to be able, they can email me, I don't have that instructor initiated substantive interaction around the topic in that specific week. So they end up going into Q&A and getting lost in that massive forum. So I'm going to be adding the topic specific optional discussion forums to these weeks to go along, let's say with the video lecture or with the text lecture that I have in that week. And that will meet that requirement and that will benefit students tremendously. I can give you another example from another course where actually our academic support team confirmed my observations from my course in another course too, that students actually find it helpful. And I think, am I good on time?
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple more examples. Auto-graded quizzes. There are a few in the course, I'm keeping them. It's okay to have auto-graded quizzes, but what I've been doing is providing weekly announcements summarizing things. So usually at the beginning of the week, I will send out an announcement, substantive. Send an announcement saying something is due today or tomorrow, that's not substantive. It needs to relate to the course content. I will introduce the topic, and at the end of the week, once I reviewed the assignments, reflections, or quiz results, I identify the weak points or some areas where students can't quite make the connection, and will help them out via that announcement and then provide additional resource. And well, that's some of the examples. I can keep going even from another courses. Overall, I can tell you that from all the standards, that's my favorite one, because in any rubric, because a lot of the items is, you know, a binary, it's a copyrighted thing or not, accessible or not, you have the syllabus in the right place or not. This process is extremely creative. You can take a look at your course, you can think about it, you can change a few things, try a few things, then you can go back and try something else. A lot of these things are easy to adjust. I think we're done with showing standards, so we can take a break and see if anyone has questions. And otherwise we can move on to Tanka to talk about the website.
Are there any questions at this point? Any thoughts about this? Thanks so much, Elena. Okay, there's someone, hold on, in the chat.
Rob, I posted the working version of version 4.
Oh, thank you, Tanka. Fantastic. Yeah, the Alex just finished it. It's hot off the presses of version 4.0. So if that a version of that is in the chat, I'll just say before you start, Tanka, it is not yet available on the OLC site as far as I know, but it will be shortly. Okay, Tanka.
I have a question.
Sure.
That's a question. I noticed when you had for the third standard, you changed the third standard so you took out deconstruct. My concern is that there's several faculty who are happy not to do something. And technically with the definition as it is, if you don't have the deconstruct, all you need to meet the third standard would be to create a folder called course information, put in a 16-page syllabus and a page that says course expectations. And you could claim that it could be easy to search that syllabus, but that could run into serious problems because students have a hard time reading a 16-page syllabus. Would there be, I mean, the idea of having a deconstructed would be, you also had, I believe, was the fourth standard that said you had to have a printable syllabus as well.
Yeah.
So wouldn't having the deconstruction guarantee that each part of the syllabus would be easier to find?
Yes, it would, Dave. It's a good point. Does anyone remember us working on this standard?
Yeah, I do actually. The purpose was that it's easier to find with technology when everything is in one document rather than everything is multiple documents. So it's easier when you're in one document for the student to Control F and find whatever it is they're looking for instead of having to do Control F through multiple documents. That was the thinking there. However, I don't believe that deconstruct or construct or together is a necessary requirement for the Oscar. This was just recommendation based on how technology is changing, and we are coming from, like you're saying, deconstructed into pieces into one document that is easily or easier searchable for things. So yes, you did notice it, right? And there was a lot of discussion about that. And I think the consensus in the group was that it's easier to find things when it's one document. However, on the website, there is a comment section. And if you have strong feelings about why yes or why not, I would strongly recommend you put a comment in so that they can be incorporated into our discussions in the future about this particular standard. Does that answer a little bit of why it was decided the way it was?
Yeah,
And-
Dave, if I remember a bit of that conversation, because that was standard number 3, it was sort of at the beginning. We went through the standards in order, so it was at the beginning of our efforts, and we, if I remember, and somebody correct me in our group if I'm not remembering this right, we did sort of feel that course information area is at this point somewhat of a ubiquitous term that most of us know, and OSCQR as a course review instrument, most of our practitioners know that the course information section really does comprise most of what's in the syllabus, all the housekeeping stuff that is in the syllabus. So I don't think I don't think, and I see what you're seeing now, that it's sort of implied that now the syllabus can replace the course information section, as the standard reads. But our best practice has always been to have redundancy between the course information section and the printable syllabus. So so I think Alex and I sort of like, as part of the old school, old school faction of the group, if you will, and promoting a course information, a deconstructed syllabus. Sort of agreed that it's more or less ubiquitous in the online courses that we've trained faculty to create. Sorry, go ahead, Elena.
Sorry, I just in SUNY Online course templates too, we've all the SUNY Online participating campuses, we actually had a lot of debate about it. Initially, we started with course syllabus as a tab, and then we switched to course information because it allows us to put their course syllabus, and I see that Delhi, they have template. That's what we're striving to at SUNY Online too, and it's not 16 pages long. It's generally speaking probably 3 pages, 4 pages. And course information, our logic was, well, if it has specific textbook information, let's say OER, where you need to drop that package or LTI and information how to navigate it, that's the perfect place to do it. Or if students need to review specific technology requirements before they go inside the modules, that's perfect place for that. So that's how we use it in SUNY Online right now. Course information, then syllabus and other course-wide information goes in there.
But there are several community colleges in SUNY that don't have mandatory uses of templates. Trust me, I've created templates. And one of the issues that we have is with 75, maybe 100 different adjuncts who are doing their best to meet the minimum requirement. As it reads, you could literally create a PDF that's 16 pages, and they have to have their 16, like it's about a 16-page syllabus for a college, right? They'll tag it and they'll say it's searchable, right? And they will meet this. And my concern is, I know there's going to be several, I hate to say lawyerly adjuncts that are going to do their best, then it's not going to be in the interest of our students. And that's my concern, that's all.
So,
I'm not saying that's the best practice, but it's something that is going to happen because we don't live in the best of all possible worlds.
right, and I do hear your concern, absolutely, I do. And having 16 pages of something is taxing on anybody, much less a student, and especially at a traditional age. I do understand. However, know that the Oscar is not really, it's a guideline. So for example, at Canton, we did have issues with some of the, we didn't have issues, but it worked better when we reworded some of the standards and then use that for our college. So we still use Oscar, it's just a little bit modified Oscar for what Canton needs. So you might go that route as well. You know, if you definitely prefer deconstructed rather than 116 page, then my suggestion would be to maybe sit down with whoever the powers are at your college and just revise a little bit, you know, to have that requirement in. Just don't take Oscar as a last resort of anything. This is the guidelines, and with the change of how SUNY system works, majority of colleges plus the technology, we felt that it makes sense to not have that requirement in there as being the constructed syllabus. So however, if that is what you prefer, I think absolutely. I do see point for both, definitely. Yeah, and if that's your practice, I think you should continue it.
And Dave, if I could chime in as well, because I'm with you. And it's brave of you to bring it up in open forum. I think it is difficult to at some points be overprescriptive and underprescriptive in Oscar. And I think that I was challenged by this one as well, because I also find that the deconstruction syllabus is a good starting place. But I also, after worked through this and gone through the rest of these and the rest of the review and gone through these standards, what I found is that, you know, some of Oscar is tied to the LMS in ways that we don't necessarily need it to be. And I think that a deconstructed syllabus works really well on our current LMS, but maybe not all future LMSs nor future uses of LMSs. And when you look at mobile users specifically, I'm wondering, you know, and it's yet to be seen, right? But being overprescriptive in making it HTML blocks, how useful that could be. I think the course information area becomes a new space to design, actually, like a course content area. And that instead of, you know, specifically saying how that design should look through a broken down syllabus, it could provide, as we were talking about earlier, ways to access content, ways to access information that is outside of what would traditionally be in a syllabus. I'm with you. I see that this could be, in a way, kind of a get out of jail free card for those that just want to put up a course information area, but also allows for different design opportunities. At least that's how I look at it and how I will kind of work with faculty on it. Hopefully that kind of gives some insight, you know, from the LMS side, or from the FLCC community college side.
All right, if you think we can move on, then I'll be happy to do that.
No, it's just one more comment from Andrea and about MCC, where they run into issues where the instructor makes changes and they don't update the deconstructed part. So a lot of times they'll update the, you know, the printable syllabus, as we've traditionally called it, but not the, you know, the actual pages in the LMS. And that was a big problem for Christine at ESC as well. Okay, I think, Dave, you know, just there was another comment in the chat that you know, I think is worth repeating, that you know, Oscar itself is OER, so it can be edited, you know, for any campus, any department. So you know, even these changes that we've, you know, infused into it are all editable, because the Oscar, the electronic version, or the Google version of Oscar is all editable. Okay. But thank you for bringing it up, Dave. these are the kind of discussions that we got into at every single meeting. It wasn't just a simple wordsmithing. It was, quite, conceptual as well.
And Rob, just one more thing that I want to repeat what Tanka said, that another purpose for this presentation is to ask for feedback.
Yes.
Ask for feedback from faculty, other campuses, and Rob Tank can show you how to provide that feedback, right?
Yep. Tanka, why don't you take it away?
All right, thank you. So in addition to changing the verbiage of standards themselves, the committee also, I don't even know if I want to call it committee, it was really a task force of a situation. So the group changed or added more explanations, more examples, and more resources into the OSCQR on the website. And I'm just going to go straight into the website, and I'm just going to drive you through it very quickly, just to give you an idea of what to look for when you actually have a little more time to sit down and spend some quality time with the rubric. Give me just 1 second. You should now be able to see the website.
You can.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. All right, so this is your classic website that has been there for a while. It's at oscqr.suny.edu. And from here, I would like to draw your attention, that is the new thing, new kid on the block, regular and substantive interaction portion. And here, if you miss the definitions that we presented today, here are all the definitions that might be relevant to maybe your campus policies or your campus trainings, or it will hopefully help with any buy-in that you might run into. So all the definitions that are new or that are finally defined, that were not defined before, are listed under, when you just click on regular and substantive interaction. And of course, I'm not going to go through the whole thing just in the interest of time. So from there, let's move on to the next page. And those are the standards that specifically we identified several standards that very clearly and directly and specifically address RSI. And again, the standards you're seeing, as well as the standards that support the RSI. So it might be some indirect relationship between the RSI and this particular standard. And those are the standards that we pointed out. And again, I'm not going to go through all that, because I do believe that it requires more of a sit down and have a good time with the website, rather than just me telling you what it is. It definitely is better understood when you sit and spend one-on-one with this. So just so you know where stuff is, under regular substantive interaction, you will see the standards. Then your next section would be how OSCQR supports RSI. Again, you have some basics about what OSCQR is, what OSCQR is not, and how RSI is related. Let me move on to what's new. This is probably something you would like if you have already been working with OSCQR. So you're trying to see what has changed in version 4. So again, reiteration of what standards were changed, and also what standards are supporting the RSI directly or indirectly. Some definitions as well. The PDF that I provided to you in the chat that we just got from Alex contained the graphics that you're seeing hopefully at the bottom of the page, which is the gauge that was created by Empire with the where RSI is and where RSI is not. And let me move back to forward rather, to all the references. Again, if you feel like glass of wine on Friday night, you have nothing else to do, why don't you jump in and just research what else is there out there on RSI. Let me go back though, before I lose you, let me go back to the main page and just practically show you how you as a faculty member or course reviewer can learn more about RSI and OSCQR and how they support each other. So on the main website, you have you have 6 different groups of standards that support different elements of the course. So from the overview and information, which is that standard 3 that we talked about, to technology and tools and so on, design and layout, until you hit the assessment and feedback. So let me just show you that standard 3 that we talked about for a minute here, and how it all lays out on the website and what changes were made there. So under overview and information, you will find all 10 standards that support directly or indirectly RSI. So let's click on 3. And when you click on that, under that, you will see a lot more information. So let's say the standard wording on its own, probably you may need more information about, well, how exactly am I going to implement that in my course? Or if I'm a reviewer, what am I looking for when I'm looking to see if this particular standard has been met or not? So if you click on that standard, it will tell you all the information basically you will need. I will give you examples. It will also tell you that it supports RSI with the graphic as well as with the text. And it will also give you examples. So what we were trying to do in the group, we were trying to see how to make your life a little bit easier by pre-formatting some things and pre-writing some things, so that you as an instructor or instructional designer know what you're looking for, and there is not much question about what was meant by each particular standard, especially when it comes to RSI. So again, you have a verbiage here that you might use in your syllabus. This is an example that we came up with. So it's already pre-written there for you. You have also some ideas about how to meet this particular standard, especially when you're faculty. Examples, we added a lot of those in those standards that we identified as those that relate to RSI. Headed example, situation, language, something that you will hopefully find helpful when designing your own courses. And again, if there are some more ideas from previous years that still apply to this particular standard, they're listed all here. So again, how I got there are 2 ways, either from the main page and then select the standard group that you are looking for ideas, or you can also go to explanations, evidence, and examples up top, and then choose one of those standard groups. So when I was choosing number 3, I went to course review and information, and then chose standard 3. And I got to the same page. Again, on the right-hand side, you will see the graphic, the RSI logo, I would say, for SUNY. And so you will know right off the bat that, yes, that standard I should look at, because that standard in particular supports RSI. And then we explain down on the page how and what you can do to make it happen for your course. Before I give my mic to Rob, I would like to ask if there are any questions. I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see your chat. If there are any questions about the rubric that I shared in the chat or the website, I'm going to put the main website URL here in the chat, in case you're not familiar with it. And again, don't take OSCQR as a holy word. It's not. It's definitely guidelines based on research. And as you can see, this is version 4, which is a good thing, because it means the OSCQR evolves with research, right? As we're seeing new things come up, as we see new guidelines come up, OSCQR is being updated as necessary. Oh, one other thing I forgot to tell you. Let me just quickly take you back to the website. If you are looking for what was new in one very quick swoop, if you get to Get OSCQR, underneath you have the change log, so you don't have to compare each standard from previous version to the current version. Under Get OSCQR change log, you will see everything that happened to version 4. So version 4 had all these changes. And this is for Oscar 3.1 and so on down into the history. So one very quick swoop, if you are looking into updating your campus standards or your campus communication to your instructors, this is how it all changed, and you will see old standard and then what it was changed to.
Tonka,
Sure.
I'm sorry. While you have that page up, finish your thought, but I want you to just stay on the website for a second.
Okay, my thought is finished.
Okay, I want to show everyone how to provide feedback on any of the standards. So if you could just pick a standard and go to it. On each and every standard in on oscar.suny.edu, there at the bottom of the page, there is, and this is a long one, so it's a good one. Yeah, this is where you can leave a comment, and we will get that comment directly. So so please feel free to post comments on any standard, and on our end, excuse me, it's really helpful for us if you use this form, because this standard is like this is standard number 3. It's posted with the comment that the substance of the comment pertains to standard number 3. So that's real helpful for us whenever we get a comment through oscar.suny.edu.
All right, do we have any questions that we need to get to? Is it okay if I stop sharing now?
Yes. Okay, I know we put a lot of information in front of you guys, so we do definitely have a few minutes for questions, comments, input from you. What do you think? This definitely be a faculty training issue in the years to come, and in the LMSs to come, and et cetera, et cetera. One thing that, just as a side note, I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of the presentation. Every now and then we would, we would arrive at a wording, or we would contemplate a wording of a standard, and then, sort of have to remind ourselves that this is actually, a course review resource, and not, sometimes we wind up with a full-blown statement of what we thought. And then we'd have to sort of stand back and say, is this observable in a course with no students? So I appreciate the effort of everyone in the work group, or the task force, as Tonka called it. And I thought it was just a real healthy discussion, and I hope the discussion will be ongoing with you, as many of you are on ground, are faculty or on the ground with faculty. So Andrea, I'm reading your question in the chat. I'm wondering how campuses will be communicating this information to your faculty. Send announcements, training courses. Yeah. Will we have a training, add to existing training courses? I'm pretty sure, with Alex, after we've introduced, this to the community fully, we have a few more things planned in terms of webinars and things like that. And of course, we need to get the rubric, get the PDF version of the rubric out there, as we just did, as Tonka did today. She put it in the chat. But we need to get it up on the OLC site where people retrieve it, where out there off the web. And then we need to get some Google programming happening, and create a Google 4.0 version of Oscar that we have not yet done, but it's on the timeline. other thoughts about this? Okay, if not, I'd like to thank everybody, especially my fellow panelists. Appreciate you making the effort, to help me communicate all of this, and to everybody. I'm sure everyone else does too. Yeah, I'm with you, Jamie. The definition of RSI, to me is still not clear enough. I would like some real world, sort of course-based terminology used with RSI. Like, are there LMS devices, specific LMS devices, and or other devices that are evidence, of
Yeah.
RSI? That
Yeah,
kind
in
of
this
thing.
presentation, I was putting a list of all the things that I do or I've encouraged faculty to do. And I'm like, okay, does this qualify? Does this qualify? Does this qualify? And I think that faculty will be curious about what is it that I'm already doing that falls under RSI and what do I need to adjust? So I think that that's something that we should all maybe talk about and
Yeah,
consider
and
how we're gonna
third-party
implement it.
tools as well.
Yeah.
As we look at demos of third-party tools, now the RSI lens is sort of stuck in my eyes
Yeah.
as I look at these tools, and I'm like, is this going to work with RSI?
Right.
Yeah.
So the good thing with the old version, the 3.1 that we had before, when we were looking at it, a lot of it was already there. So if the instructors are, it was just not named, RSI, but the concepts were already there. So really and truly what we did was tweak things. We did not overhaul anything because there was nothing to overhaul. It was really, the beginning product was really good when it comes to interaction and pointing it out. So it was really just tweaks. So if the instructors are already designing courses based on OSCQR, they're on a really good way to just put couple bows here and there and be very good on interaction front. So I think that's good news. It did not need overhauling. We were just really nitpicky about every single word just to make sure that it coincides with the current research that we have and the practices.
And another thing
Great.
to note too, I believe we still have a few items to finish as a task group. I think it was Jeff who came up with that idea. Was it Jeff, to include a list of items that are not going to be a good practice?
Well, I think I want to expand on that. I think we came up with as a group these are things that may not will work against RSI, and here are some alternatives.
Right.
So we don't want to leave people with just a list of bad, don't do those, slap on the wrist, but rather, as we do with these instructional designers, think about something else that might work in its place. With the quizzing, for example, and the auto-graded quizzing, providing substantive feedback after each quiz in comments or in other places where you are supporting it in some way, getting the instructor presence. It's amazing how much this involves instructor presence, and like Rob was saying, it's hard to see in design, but I think there are some really cool ways to do it.
Eventually, what we would like, in the future, is from the view of the accrediting bodies, we would like the use of OSCQR as both either a course development resource and or a course review resource, being formalized in for each campus as being indicative of meeting the accrediting body standard of RSI. We would love it to be synonymous with RSI, so that an accrediting body could look at the formal implementation of OSCQR and say, "Oh, okay, you meet our RSI standards."
Yep. That would be great. If
Yeah.
we can quantify that then.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, any other questions for Rob and the crew? Tonka, Elena, or although Jeff has to leave. Anybody else? Bye, Jeff. Thanks for joining us today. If not, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, everybody.